Okay, I know I am the only thing that stands between you and a plane or your family or a beer at the bar, whatever it may be, so I appreciate you staying through the end of it. First off, you know, being the last person, I think I owe it to say thank you to Dr. Harris for, for putting this on. She's done a great job, so a quick round of applause for her. My name is Wes Hardaker. I work for a company called Sparta. We do mostly consulting work, but I'm going to be talking today about SNMP, which I know is a topic that many of you hate, but I promise to make this fun, and some of the questions I'm going to ask you, you'll find useful regardless of whether you like SNMP or not. This is going to be an interactive session, so how many people know how to raise their hands? So this is my poll, so all of you that didn't raise your hands, I know to exclude you from the count. So really briefly, I'm going to go over the problem space and the solution space, and the operator requirements and the questions and answers. Really, I expect to be the majority of it. I'm going to actually be asking you guys questions rather than the other way around. So really briefly, you know, SNMP security history is long and involved, and I'm not going to go over it in detail, but SNMP v1 came, you know, 1998. SNMP v3, which finally did add security, came in 1988. SNMP v3 finally came in 1998 and added decent authentication and encryption. And it is more secure than version 1 and version 2. But one of the problems in the design process is that nobody asked the operators, what do you need? What, you know, how is it going to be useful for you? And the results are not entirely as useful, I think, as many people would like it to be. Specifically, the SNMP v3 user model is entirely based on its notion of its user database, and there's no tie-in to how you manage your existing accounts. You can't tie it into Radius, you can't tie it into many of the other authentication mechanisms that you're using. Doing setup and user management and key distribution and all those kind of problems that you've solved in other environments is very difficult in SNMP v3. It doesn't make use of some of the long list of stuff that you see there, and we're going to go over that again in a minute. So really briefly, I'm not going to go over all these blocks. It's not important. This is the SNMP v3 architecture. And the most important aspect that you need to know about this is that it's modular. The right decision that the architects made in this is they made it really easy to extend it. So to change how security works, we only need to change one little tiny spot. We only need to add one little blippet, and everything else will work, including the access control mechanism. So we can change authentication without changing how access control works, and it's all going to work magically. That's the goal. So first off, this is not SNMP v4. It's a minor edition. That's the most important thing you need to know. And the goal is to simply enable you to make use of your existing account information that you already have available to you, be that Radius or whatever it is you used. It should be fast to put through the IETF, which I know that that's a something you've never heard of before, but the IETF is actually trying to do that more. They're trying to produce lots of small documents, and whether they succeed or not, well, this will be one of the test cases. It's one of the early ones. But the real thing we need, and the important one at the bottom, is we need your input. We need to know, is this good, is this bad, do you want it, if you don't? If you don't want it, we're probably not going to do the work, or we'll do it in some other avenue if some people do and some people don't. It's not beneficial to make standards that you guys don't use. It does no good for anybody, but it wastes time. So here's a real quick poll, and this is the beginning of the raise your hand part, so wake up everybody. How many people use SNMP v3 today? Not many people. There's maybe 10 or so. That should be an aha. That should be a sign that, uh-oh, something's wrong. Either the vendors aren't implementing it or you guys aren't using it, and why. How many people think that the authentication mechanism is too hard to set up for v3, and that's one of the reasons why you're not using it? More people. Would you use SNMP v3 if it would tie into your existing databases? Would you find that beneficial? Almost the same number of people as the last question. So here's where we get into the stuff that will be interesting regardless of whether you use SNMP or not, because I think just a show of hands of who uses what technology will be interesting. This really weird, wacky creature was a conglomerate of most of the O'Reilly books on each of the different subjects. But so there's a large number of identification mechanisms that are in use today. First off, there's a local account model, user accounts that actually exist on the device, whether that's a username and password, possibly run through crypt, or whether that's SSH keys or whatever else. They're maintained individually on each device. And my question is, how many people make use of local accounts, not SSH in this case, but local password accounts and things like that? A fair number. This is on the device, not in a Radius server. How many people use SSH with public and private keys in order to do login authentication? More. That's good. You're using good security. That's good. The other common one that I think is more widely used is things like Radius and TACX Plus, where you have your device is actually talking to an authentication server. It's much more scalable generally because all of those accounts can be maintained on a central machine. How many people are making use of either Radius or TACX Plus or a similar technology? That's what I thought. Lots of people. There's a sort of an inverse of that, which is where there's a ticket master, and this is something that hands out tickets saying you're good to log in to the remote machine. Kerberos is sort of the ideal technology for this, where the client actually talks to a ticket master, gets a ticket, and then hands it to the server. The server never needs to interact with the ticket master once the infrastructure is set up. How many people are using Kerberos in some way? A couple. Finally, there's public-private key infrastructures beyond, like SSH and what I was talking about before. These are real X509 certificate infrastructures. The common usages of these are over protocols that require TLS or SSL in order to validate, especially the remote server, so HTTPS, things like that. How many people are using TLS, SSL, X509 certificates somewhere in their network to do authentication? Note that that does count authenticating the server, not just the user. Okay, fair amount. So in order to fix SNMP so that those of you that raised their hand saying it would be beneficial to do this, there's a couple of paths forward. All of the work has actually already been done to a large part. It's just picking one and going forward. So the solution's actually already there. It's just actually deploying it through the IETF and writing code for it. There's three that are candidates. One is the session-based security model, which is written by myself and David Perkins, David Perkins is actually in the back if you want to talk to him later. David, why don't you stand up for a sec so if people have questions. Oh, he's by the water can, waiting for conversation by the water jug. The other one is a Kerberos-based solution which uses Kerberos. Note that in Kerberos you don't have to you can tie Kerberos to other technologies like Radius and things like that. That's not well understood, but you can. I'm actually an author of this one too. I'm competing against myself. And it's available and has already been implemented in NetSNMP 5.0, but that's the only package that implements it, so you're not necessarily likely to have used it yet. And then finally, Cisco is pushing another draft yet that has not been published called USM Plus. I don't know the details of it, but their goal was to make it as close to USM as possible, but still tie in Radius. So as close to the SNMP v3 infrastructure you see today, but tied into other stuff using the same mechanisms. I'm not a fan of that one, but it is a candidate. So finally, questions and answers. If you guys have questions, please let me know. I'll be available afterwards to talk, and so will David Perkins. There's a mailing list started up within the IETF that you're welcome to join if you want. And there's a website. If you go to the NetSNMP website, there's a link to it from there too. This website, due to my low bandwidth on my personal network, is currently redirecting you to NetSNMP. So don't be surprised when you end up somewhere else, because I rehoused it for the purposes of 500 people slashdotting my home network. But please do fill out this site. It has more questions. It's going to enable me to take a better poll of exactly how many of you think what opinion. There's some more detailed questions so that if I didn't hit your authentication mechanism, you can fill it in later. And if we get a lot of requests for that type of mechanism, then we'll try to make sure that that's possible to achieve. Okay? Anybody have questions? I told you it'd be fast.